All right, all right, all right. I guess my backdrop doesn't want to act right. What is up with this virtual background? Anyways, whatever. Anyways, welcome. Happy Saturday. My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. I hope everybody's doing well on this Saturday. I thought I'd hop on here because it's rainy and it's cold. I really don't have much going on at this moment, so I thought I'd get on here and try to talk a little bit Idaho. You know how it goes. Anyways, thank you so much for coming into my channel and hanging hanging out with me and spending some time. Always appreciated. I want to play this Annie Elise video because she was talking about alternative suspects. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that also because I don't know a lot about what they're talking about. And let's see what this video has to say regarding what she's talking about alternative suspects. So let's see what Annie has to say. And here we go.
Welcome back to an all-new episode of 10 to Life with me, Annie Elise. Now, the reason I wanted to jump on here today is because I want to talk all about the Idaho case and more particularly some key details that have emerged in the last few days. Which let me just start by saying this. Do not get caught up on thinking that 7 minutes doesn't matter, because in a case like this where 4 college students were brutally murdered, 7 minutes can change everything. It's the difference between being able to commit a quadruple homicide or, as we're now hearing, not even being close to the scene. Now, if you've been following this case the last few years like we have, people are divided out there.
So she started talking about the 7 minute gap. I think I've heard a little bit about this, but it's interesting to still learn a little bit more about it. So let's continue on, see what she had to say.
A lot of people who think that Brian Koberger, the alleged murderer, is absolutely guilty, that there's not a shadow of a doubt, 100%, they believe there's evidence against him, he's guilty. However, there is a pretty large side of people out there who actually believe that he is innocent, even more so than innocent, being set up, being framed by other people, by law enforcement. And I'll be honest, when I started hearing all of those theories, I kind of felt like it's going a little bit down the conspiracy theory route. And I am somebody who does believe in a court of law, you are innocent until proven guilty. Although I also am human. And so in a lot of these cases, I do sway to one side before the trial sometimes even happens. And in this case, I did sway towards the side of Brian Koberger being guilty. I just felt
I agree with you. I've done the same thing. I do believe in presumption of innocence until proven guilty, but when you have so much evidence that's being let out over and over and over, and it is just a back and forth, you understand enough to know that it's just not the trial at this point. So anything that's being put out there, it is what it is.
Felt like there were too many coincidences and too many things that stood out. Again, just my opinion. But regardless which side of the fence you're on, this is shaping up to be one of the most high-profile murder trials of the decade. Idaho versus Brian Koberger. And now we're just 5 months out from trial. And these new court filings that have come out, they are explosive. I mean, we're talking surveillance footage breakdowns, expert accusations of a cover-up, the Amazon purchase history, and even a second person of interest from early on. So we have a lot to talk about. So let's get into it.
This is 10 to Life with Annie Elise.
Now, as we know, lots of documents and information has been released over the past few weeks, from text history to 911 calls to Brian's selfie, the Amazon history, the works. And arguably, a lot of that information does not look good for Brian.
She had one of the coolest intros. I just got to say that.
But Brian Koberger's defense team is coming out swinging because they are saying, no. The prosecution, they have it all wrong. starting with where Brian was that night. It all comes down to his cell phone and something that is called timing advance records. And these aren't your basic, tower pings, cell phone data that is recovered. These are hyper specific. They can tell you not only which tower a phone hit off of, but the direction that the phone was actually traveling and how far away it was. Now, Brian had an AT&T phone, and his attorneys claim that these records, which they also say the state failed to turn over, would all support his alibi. Because according to them, remember, he was driving to a park that night. He was going out to stargaze. He was not driving to King Road. Now, the state said, okay, well, we gave you everything that AT&T had back in December of 2022. But the defense is saying, no, that's not true. And they even point to the fact that the prosecution later turned over timing records for 2 of the victims, another early person of interest, and over 3,800 other people, all pinging those same towers from back in November of 2022. So the question that they're having is, if they had it for them, why wouldn't they have it for Brian? And here's where it gets...
Well, that's true. That's true. Why wouldn't they have it for Brian? But at the point, up to the 21st, Brian wasn't even on the radar. He wasn't even on the radar. So the alternative suspects, I can understand why they would have theirs and they wouldn't have Brian's at that point. But once they got his phone, did that enable them to match up the 7 minutes, or did that still leave 7 minutes in between there? It's a big old mess as it sounds, but I'm sure when trial comes along, everything's going to make sense.
It's a little bit murky because the state says that AT&T only retained those records for 5 days in 2022. But the defense's cell phone expert isn't buying it. And he even filed a declaration accusing prosecutors of fully going out of their way to mislead the court and essentially hiding evidence that might exonerate Brian Kohberger. Which that's obviously a really big accusation, right? But why does it matter? Well, here's why. All because of a 7-minute discrepancy that the defense says is everything. According to investigators, a white Elantra, believed to be Brian's, left at 2:44 a.m. But WSU cameras show a similar car at 2:42 a.m. And they shows this car in a location that does not line up. So that would suggest that that earlier vehicle wasn't his. But the state allegedly did not correct that inconsistency. And the defense argues that the reason why is because the 2:42 a.m. time slot, that better supports their narrative. And his phone? Well, the prosecution says that it stopped pinging at 2:47 a.m., implying that he turned it off to avoid tracking. However, the defense experts say it actually stopped reporting at 2:54 a.m., 7 minutes later. And if that...
Okay, so if it stopped reporting at 2:54, that's 7 minutes, as they're saying. That would be 7 more minutes of direction as I'm thinking this. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Don't come after me. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. The 7 minutes would give you more of a directional way that the Elantra would have been going. Hence, before we were told that it was shut off at 2:47, or that he left at 2:47. And the phone was turned off minutes later. So now that 7 minutes could implicate which direction he was actually going, where it could say that the narrative that the state has is totally unviable because it isn't going in the direction that the state alleges. But it's interesting nonetheless. 7 minutes is quite a bit of time to be going one direction and also turn around if your phone is off. So you could be going one direction, turn your phone off, and then turn around and head another direction, and you would be untrackable. But, that hasn't been proven one way or the other, so I'm just talking.
That's true. It undermines the entire theory of when he left, where he went, and how fast all of this unfolded. 7 minutes. That is the heart of the defense's argument. Now, let's also talk about the state's cell expert, FBI agent Nick Balance, because he says that Brian Koberger's phone pinged within 100 meters of King Road, of the actual house on King Road, 23 times between July and November of 2022. And he also says that these pings all happened between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., which I will admit, when I heard that, that sounds pretty damning, right? It sounds like premeditation, stalking, maybe even casing the scene, learning patterns of the comings and the goings, all of that. But the defense is saying, no, hold on. That radius.
Well, I have to agree with you because I thought the same thing, and I've thought the same thing. And just by watching this video, not changing my mind, but I'm open to hearing other suggestions or other avenues that could be difference makers in the trial. I mean, I'm open to it because this isn't a trial. You know what I mean? Like, once we get to the trial, you're actually going to hear just the narrative pitched by both sides. All the evidence is either going to be in place or it's going to be eluded and taken out, hopefully on the 9th when the judge rules on this stuff. So I'm open to hearing all this stuff and not necessarily digging my heels, not my heels, I don't wear heels, but the heels of my feet in the ground and saying no, or yes. I mean, this is an interesting thing right here, but I don't know about the alternative suspect yet, but let's see what she continues to have to say. This is a very good video.
Also includes restaurants, gas stations, even stores. And their expert says that the phone was never stationary outside of that house. Not ever stopped, not parked, just passing through. Which is a pretty good argument. Still, though, I mean, 23 pings, it's kind of hard for a jury or even a layperson like me to ignore. Unless, of course, those missing phone records prove that he was never even close enough to the house for it to matter. And that's just the beginning of this whole defense now coming at the state pretty hard. Now, we know that prosecutors have come out too saying that they have receipts that show Brian bought a black balaclava mask.
So 23 pings, and supposedly none of those were stationary. So if you watch this on replay, or if you hop into the chat, or you're already in the chat, by the way, Harlot, thank you for being here. What other alternative situation could have arose for those 23 pings and none of them to be stationary? I mean, do you honestly have to stake out and stop at a house in order for you to be watching? I mean, supposedly he drove around 5 times before he actually parked. So did he do this 23 other times and just drove around the area watching? I mean, because, let's look at it hypothetically here. And this is just hypothetically. And I'm not trying to paint a picture one way or the other. So I'm just brainstorming, because this is actually how my brain works. Is if you're driving around a residence and you're actually wanting to be surveying or just watching it, wouldn't you be taking photos or videos as you drove by? Because there's times when I drive by certain things and my phone never stops. It just pings as I'm driving by, taking a video or taking photos. So the fact that he didn't necessarily stop but was in the area, supposedly, I mean, that's just my mind going out there a little bit. I don't know what y'all think on that. Let me know in the chat if you or in the comments if you watch this on a replay. I mean, because being stationary would mean that you stop, honestly. You stop and you're actually watching, or you're taking notes, or whatever you're doing. But being, if you're driving, you could be doing all kinds of stuff.
from Dick's Sporting Goods back in January of 22. And a balaclava mask is basically kind of like a ski mask. It's one of the like knit, a lot of food delivery people actually wear them back east because they're on the bicycles and things like that. But anyway, they're saying that they found this receipt from January of 2022, 11 months before the murders. And it's also the same kind of mask that the roommate Dylan described when she saw a man in the house with, quote, bushy eyebrows that night. However, as you can imagine, the defense is, of course, already trying to dismantle this. They argue that, Dylan was intoxicated. She was drunk. She didn't know what she was seeing. It was dark. And they also are saying that the detectives might have influenced her memory. They also point out, I think the obvious, especially for anybody who has ever lived back east, that it was January in Pennsylvania. It was freezing cold. So wearing a face mask or a balaclava, not very unusual or very groundbreaking. Here's the thing, though. Dylan made a drawing of the mask that she says that she saw that night. And although it is super basic and generic, it does look strikingly similar to the one that Brian allegedly bought. Now, is that damning? It depends. If she drew it before police ever mentioned a face mask or anything like that to her, it is a big problem for the defense because they have the theory of law enforcement potentially swaying her to say that he was wearing that and that they...
And that's another good point. If she drew this during the interrogation, during one of the first two interrogations, because she's supposedly interrogated 3 or 4 times, if she drew that in one of the first two, before the police even asked the specifics about the mask, then there was no kind of leading questions or probing questions that would have assisted her in understanding what kind of mask it was. Because for the earliest time frame that I can remember, many people were stating that it was a COVID mask. It wasn't a balaclava. It was a COVID mask. So all this time, up until recent, I believe that all of us have thought that it was a COVID type mask, something that you covered the bottom of your mouth with, and all you could see was, the eyebrows in this area. But I always wondered, he had to wear something over his head because otherwise she would have been able to tell what kind of hair color he had, whether it was curly, whether it was straight, whether it had, he had hair at all. Those kind of characteristics. I don't believe that they asked about the eyebrow color because there's been statements about the eyebrow color. How could she not see that eyebrow color? How could she not see the eyeballs? The color of the eyes? Well, supposedly as he was passing her, that's when she got the glimpse. She's in the doorway. He's passing. He's 3 feet away. The middle of the night. It's not the best of lighting. It's not like it's lit up like it is right now. And he's passing her. So, if you've ever had that situation happen to you, you understand how quickly these things do occur and how quickly somebody could see or not see certain things. So it's not necessarily her fault that she wasn't able to give more descriptive interpretation of what she witnessed. It was interesting that she got enough as she did.
They had an influence over her. So if she drew that before she even spoke with them, that theory doesn't really hold much water, but we don't know that yet. But the defense is also going after digital evidence, namely Brian's Amazon purchase history. Because according to the prosecutors, he bought a K-bar knife, also a K-bar knife sheath, and a knife sharpener, all on Amazon. Also, all in March of 2022, 8 months before the murders. And as we know, that sheath, well, we learned that that same kind of sheath was found at the crime scene, and it had his DNA on the snap. But here's the defense's angle in this. Brian lived with his family. The Amazon account was shared. So anybody in that house could have made those purchases. And they're even arguing that the knife and the sheath were part of a larger camping bundle that was purchased, complete with bear spray, a backpack, and a tire inflator, which I gotta hand it to him. It's a pretty creative argument. But we know that the prosecution will also hit back hard with one simple question. Great. Well, where are those items now? If his family says that they bought them, the state...
And that's the bigger question right now that you have to ask yourself is where are these items? Because if you want to say, I mean, because I understand this point of view and I enjoyed the fact that she's actually breaking this down from both sides because I've tried to do it and, people don't really participate on that avenue because they hear one side and they just want to shut their brain off and say, no, 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 no. This is how it happened. Logically, though, objectively, I can answer that. It'd be like, where is the stuff that you bought? Where's the knife? Where's the sharpener? Where's the sheath? You know, um, okay, PKC, glad that you're here. Where is this stuff? If you bought it as a bundle, it would have been at the house when they arrested you and they did the inventory. I didn't see any bear spray. I didn't see any of the other stuff that she just talked about. Where's this stuff at? So that's a good question. And maybe you have an answer for that. Maybe you do. Maybe your lawyer has an answer for that, or maybe she has a scenario that can show the jury how these objects weren't even tied to you or where they're located or things of that nature. I mean, it's interesting to find that out because that's what we all want is answers, correct? We want the truth. We want answers objectively, not one-sided or the other.
Is going to, of course, be like, okay, then show them to us. And if you can't show them to us, then that raises a very different question. What happened to them? And where are they now? Because as you may remember, the murder weapon has never been recovered. So if they're saying we all bought this as part of a camping bundle, okay, great. Where is it? Show it to me. Because it's believed that the knife, which was the murder weapon, had been dumped. So this also could be why his family might be called to testify. But if the defense wants to suggest that somebody else made those purchases, the prosecution, of course, will ask them under oath then who bought them. And let's also talk about what might have been one of the creepiest revelations in this case that we have talked about before, but I want to mention it again. And it's the selfie. Because according to those newly released files, Brian took this selfie just 6 hours after the murders. It's at 10:31 a.m., the morning of the killings. He's there standing in a bathroom, kind of appears like his hair is wet or freshly styled. He's giving a thumbs up, looking, I don't know, happy, accomplished. It's also worth mentioning that when we had mapped out his route the morning of the murders, the early morning, according to the pings in the affidavit, this was from like 2 years ago, but I did a full map time with you guys. He is suspected to have returned to the crime scene shortly after 9 a.m. His phone allegedly pinged leaving his apartment at 9 a.m., and then he returned to his apartment at 9:32 a.m. So could this selfie that was taken an hour later at 10:31 a.m. be him reveling in his handiwork, him revisiting the crime scene that morning, seeing that nothing has unfolded yet, people were still sleeping, he got away with it, and then he comes back, he's cleaned up, he disposes perhaps the murder weapon, and then he's given, a thumbs up to the camera, celebrating what he thought was the perfect crime.
This is interesting as well because I saw this, on Facebook, those Idaho murder groups go hard. They go harder than YouTube does. I saw this post earlier today about this photo, and somebody said they had mentioned and left a comment where supposedly his mom knew that he had trouble with this top button. And this photo didn't mean anything about the murders. It's just simply telling his mom, I was able to button the top button. Well, unless he sent a text underneath there that specified why he was giving the thumbs up, wouldn't you be pointing at the button and giving the thumbs up like, I did it? Does that really make sense? I think it's interesting to hear about that. And Fair Maiden wins. Thank you for being in the chat. Unless you have evidence of that, please don't speculate in here. This isn't that kind of chat. But thank you for your comment. We kind of don't like to spread rumors, you know? So please be wary of spreading misinformation.
Maybe. But if he's innocent, I mean, talk about a wildly unfortunate selfie. Either way, though, prosecutors want this selfie admitted because they not only want to show demeanor, but they want to highlight the infamous bushy eyebrows that Dylan claimed to have seen that night. And let's also not forget about the roommates as a whole, Dylan and Bethany, because we now have a minute-by-minute breakdown of their phone activity and even their social media activity from 2 a.m. through the 911 call that happened a little before noon. In that time span, they were calling the victims, they were texting the victims, they were calling and texting each other, even Snapchatting and DMing on Instagram. Bethany also called her dad at 7:30 a.m., and Dylan, meanwhile, was on Instagram for 2 hours straight. Now, this has been a very big point of contention, too, because a lot of the people who are in the, I don't even want to say Bryan Kohberger innocent camp, but just thinking there's more to this story and more to this case, they're saying, why were they saw something that night, they were freaked out, then they woke up and then they casually just exchanged messages and called people and were scrolling on social media. Like, what are you talking about? Why did they still wait hours to call 911? However, a lot of other people are saying, yeah, they were spooked that night. They were also wasted. They knew people came and went out of that house all the time. Maybe they woke up and they were hungover and they were like, wow.
The one thing that I want to ask about the theories that people have as far as why didn't they call 911 sooner? This is my opinion, okay? You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to come at me for it. And this isn't spreading misinformation because I'm not saying this is factual. This is my opinion, okay? You know, if you've ever been intoxicated, if you've ever had any kind of night where you're up and down, up and down. Hell, I had one the other night. I was awoken out of my sleep and I wasn't even intoxicated. It took me a long time to focus. It took me a long time to realize what was being asked of me. And I was being asked to drive a vehicle, to drop it off where it wouldn't be hit by hail. All the way there and all the way back, I wasn't clear. I was clear enough to drive, but I wasn't clear enough to really focus on my thought pattern. I was kind of in autopilot. So I can understand what it's like to be woken up 3 times and she's texting during these times. I understand it. It's not like you're going to open the door, go right back to sleep, and be instantly asleep within a couple seconds. If people are really being logical and they're being open-minded, they would understand that this individual would not be instantly asleep. And of course, she's going to try to figure out what's going on because nobody else is answering their phone. The people she's texting, the victims, are not answering their phones. She texts Bethany. She's the only one that answers and responds. So who would you be texting otherwise if you weren't texting Bethany, if you were trying to figure out what was going on? What was going on? You know, so to me, it doesn't speak out a big conspiracy. It really doesn't. In the 8 hours, once the rest of these text messages were released, and yesterday, I guess, we got a document that spoke on an individual's expertise on what he's looking into, the downloads of the phones and all this and that. And part of his expertise is to see if photos have been deleted or videos or anything like that. I mean, understand where people get that they could have known what was going on. I get that because in the beginning I was very back and forth. I wasn't clear exactly what direction I was going to go because there wasn't a lot out there. And the direction that I was hearing about just didn't make sense. You know, I even went as far as thinking maybe the DoorDash driver and the killer were in on it. because I mean, if you're only told so much. But as the chips started to fall, I started to open my mind up a little bit and started to understand that not everything, because it could happen like that, means that it did happen like that. You know what I mean? So it it is intriguing, to say the least, about these text messages. But we've known about these text messages for a long time. We were told by a news outlet, I think it was ABC or something, that they were texting each other. We've known that. It's no big anomaly that we suddenly found some information that was nefarious. Harlot says from the text, it looks like Bethany actually texted Dylan first, unless we weren't shown the first contact. I wonder if she heard the same thud the outside camera picked up. That's a good point. Not allowed out there by design. Okay. Well, I mean, one thing for certain is we will get everything at the trial, regardless. And at that point, people won't be able to say that there's nothing, they're still hiding stuff. Because at that point, everything that they decided to use against this individual will be at trial. This point, we're just getting the documents that have been sealed. And, in my opinion, it feels like people are just going crazy and looking at these things as evidence for one way or the other. I mean, if you really want justice, you want the right pieces to fit together. So, how could you not take these text message transcript and be happy that we were given this? Because for so long, we didn't even have this. We didn't have the 911 call. We didn't have any of that. And they've given us pieces to show parts of that night. And people still aren't happy about it. They're still more angry or more decisive on one side or the other, rather than to be grateful that we're even getting anything. I mean, I'm happy that we get anything or anything that we've gotten thus far.
Oh, I really overreacted last night, but let me just text them to double check that they're okay. Meanwhile, I'm hungover, I'm scrolling, I'm looking at Snapchat, I'm looking at the pictures from the night before. I mean, I think either side is a fair argument. It's really going to come down to what we hear when they testify. I don't know. I personally don't think there's anything super nefarious involved with that. I think it's a couple of college drunk girls who went out. They didn't want to overreact. They also had seen people coming and going, and it was November at that time. So not that it would necessarily warrant at all wearing a ski mask in Idaho, but maybe they were like, I'm drunk. I don't want to like call the police and make a big deal about it. And then when they wake up, they're like, oh, I'm so hungover. Like, can you believe last night or this and that? But something still doesn't feel right. Let me text Kaylee or let me text Maddie. I don't know. In my gut, in my heart.
And I know people have not gone down this avenue, but to be fair to these surviving roommates, all those noise complaints that the cops came out there and they came in 2 deep. Let's say they do call 911 and they're incoherent. They don't know what's really going on, but they're mumbling and jumbling. The cops show up. These two are underage. They're both intoxicated. They've probably been told before these others were murdered, hey, you need to keep the noise down. You need the cop to quit coming over here. So if these older roommates told them that, don't you think it would have been in their mind not to call the cops first rather than to call the police and have the police, after already threatening them twice for noise complaint tickets or people having to be going before the Greek council and all this other stuff, all this was told to them. Not making an excuse. I'm just putting that out there as a reason why 911 wasn't called earlier and why they were calling their parents and why they were calling other people to come over. Because you don't want to pay fines. You don't want the Greek council alerted. And you sure as hell don't want to be the roommate that causes the cops to come and target your home. But people don't go that far as to thinking. They're just going as far as there must be something missing. There must be something missing. Right. In the PCA, it said that Dylan and Bethany both said that the roommates were asleep, or at least in their room, by approximately 4 a.m. Neither one of them said we were asleep. At least that's what we know of. Good point. I mean, even if they weren't asleep, if you're going to toe the line and you're going to hold people accountable for their wording or the document wording and things like that, then you need to read all of it when you report on it. Don't just cherry pick what you want your audiences to hear. I mean, it works both ways. You can't cherry pick and still be biased and one-sided if you're trying to persuade your narrative on your audiences. You need to be open, just like I'm trying to be open today. I'm trying to be open-minded, and I'm trying to be open when I'm reporting this at the best of my ability.
Heart of hearts, I don't believe there's anything more to it. I think it's just young, inexperienced girls who probably haven't seen the true evil of the world like we have witnessed, to where you would think twice about something like that, and they were more involved with social media. I might be proven wrong during the trial, but that's my opinion. But now let's get to the driving map, because surveillance footage from multiple homes show a white Elantra circling the King Road neighborhood. And this Elantra is circling over and over between 3:30 a.m. and 4:04 a.m. And they didn't take a main road in. The car used back roads, almost like somebody knew the area. Or say, somebody who had been casing the area for months earlier. Remember all those cell phone pings from months earlier. And this was also a map that we put together 2 years ago showing the route. I'm putting it on screen for those of you who are watching the video version of this.
So if they have this map and it has the time frames, I'm confused as to why this map is not sufficient enough to show the pings, or this is the camera, right? These are the cameras where he was supposedly seen on these cameras. I'm getting the pings and the cameras confused. Apologize. So one or the other has to be sufficient. If it's not the pings, okay, let's not go with the pings. How can you debunk the cameras? How can you say these cameras are not viable enough to put your defendant or your client in this place? And if he wasn't here, where was he? Where was he? Who can vouch for his whereabouts? Let me play devil's advocate here, okay? If he wasn't here at 3:26, where was he at 3:26 a.m.? Who can vouch for his whereabouts? You don't want to use the pings to show that he wasn't near the house, but you can't use the pings either at 3:26 to show he was somewhere else. You get what I'm saying? If he at 3:28 a.m., if this wasn't him traveling westbound, show me at 3:28 a.m. he was traveling eastbound or northbound or southbound somewhere else. But you don't have that because the phone was not reporting to a tower, was not reporting to a network. So there's no alibi there. There's no ability for you to show me that. At this time, he supposedly entered the neighborhood. Well, if it wasn't him, where was he at this time? Where was he at 4:04? Where was he when supposedly he was circling around 1122 King Road 3 times at 4:20 a.m.? Where was he? Where was he at 4:20 a.m. in seconds? If you want to use the pings to show that he wasn't there, then you better have a good existence of where he was, because that's going to be the counter argument of the state. You get what I'm saying? What do y'all think, chat? Do you think that's fair? I mean, do you think that's fair on both sides? I mean, because if you're wanting to say these pings 23 other times don't show him here, they don't show him, stationary, well then show me where he was. where these cameras supposedly got this vehicle on camera, where was he? Where was he at 3:26? Do you have an individual to be able to verify his whereabouts? Do you have another camera that shows he was somewhere else? But if he was at the park or heading to the park, how can that be an alibi? How can that be proven? It can't. Especially if you can't show that the phone was on. The phone didn't come on until after the murders. Do you get what I'm saying? 28 minutes after. So if the phone didn't come on 28 minutes after, then how can you show at these times that this wasn't him? It's as simple as that. You know, a lot of people want to make this harder than it is because they like the excitement of it all. But to be fair, this is how it's going to go in the court trial. It's going to be, okay, well, if he wasn't there at this time, you're saying that this wasn't sufficient and this wasn't capable of being done, then show us the counter argument. Where was he? Where was he at 3:28, 3:26, 4:04, the 3 times around the residence at 4:20? Where was he? We want specifics. We want verification and not this BS. He was out hiking, stargazing. You better have some photos with these timestamps or close to them in those photos, because if you don't, it's not going to be viable. And the jury, I probably guarantee it that they're not going to believe it. Once again, if he wasn't here, based on these cameras, and everybody wants to say that's not the water launcher, that doesn't look like a water launcher to me, okay, then show me where he was. If you have definitive proof of where he was, because this is what the state is arguing right here. These are the pictures we got. This looks like his water launcher. We're tracking him at this point, at this point, at this point. So but he doesn't have to say anything, but the prosecution can be asking those questions, just like I'm asking him, Jeff. He doesn't have to defend himself, but the prosecution can ask, just like I did in front of the jury at 3:36. The defense claims that or 3:26, we claim that the defendant was observed traveling westbound. The defense denies that their client was in this area, that he was, based on their alibi, hiking and stargazing and all these things. But there's no proof in his alibi because his phone was off.
But it was almost like somebody was planning something, knowing how to come in and out, how to maneuver. Now, let's also talk about the latest angle that the defense is pushing, because it's not about the phone records, it's not about surveillance footage anymore, but it's about Bryan Kohberger's mental and physical capacity, so much so to even be able to pull a crime like this off. According to the defense, Bryan has 3 diagnosed conditions: autism spectrum disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, otherwise known as OCD, and something called developmental coordination disorder, or DCD. So they're arguing that this specific coordination disorder, it impacts his fine motor skills and his visual motor coordination, all the way to the point where, in their words, it would have been impossible for him to move that quickly through that house, kill 4 people, strip off bloody clothing, and then get out, all in under 20 minutes. But the state, they're pushing back hard on this argument, and kind of makes sense to me because they want this information kept out. Obviously, it doesn't help their argument. But the defense says that it is crucial context, especially because the prosecution plans to use Brian's behavior as part of their argument. I mean, think about it. He wore gloves all the time. He put that garbage in Ziploc bags. He had what witnesses describe as a blank stare. He disposed of trash in his neighbor's bins. So to the state, those are all red flags. To us, those seem like red flags. They say it's somebody who is trying to hide their DNA, avoid detection, go under the radar. But the defense is saying, no, you have it all wrong. That's just who he is, a lifelong germaphobe, someone with OCD, someone whose behavior might look suspicious to outsiders, but it actually has a clinical explanation.
Okay, so let's look at that aspect. Has he ever been observed anytime on campus wearing gloves other in his classroom? Has he ever been seen by any of the neighbors sorting his trash in other people's trash cans? Has he ever been observed wearing gloves? He wasn't observed wearing gloves on the way to Pennsylvania on those 2 stops. Not at all. He didn't have those gloves on when the officer pulled him over while he was in the crosswalk. He didn't have gloves when he was signing that piece of paper, that photo, with his right hand. Most photos that's been shown of him in videos, he's not had any gloves on at any of those points. But after a murder, all of a sudden you become a germaphobe? How does that happen? And these are the questions that people don't want asked. These are the questions that people don't have answers for. And they'll come at you and they'll get angry with you and they'll call you names and they'll push back and they'll do all this stuff. But the point of the matter is, if you look at this from both sides, which I am, because there's a before and there's an after. Before, there was none of this, unless there was neighbors that said, yeah, I saw him sorting garbage, and I even noticed Ziploc baggies in my garbage can. Okay, well, that might be normal. But to people, they want to make it such a non-big deal, like, okay, he did it all the time. Well, was there any proof of that he did it prior to the murders?
And then there's, of course, the most important question in that. Could he have physically been capable to do this? The prosecution says that Brian cased the house. He cased it for months. He entered the home. He carried out 4 brutal murders. Then he removed blood-soaked clothing and escaped in just, mere minutes. And based on the timeline, again, that we constructed 2 years ago, based on the affidavit, the pings, the cell phone records of Xana, everything, there would have been a 20-minute window for this to have happened. A 20-minute window, not from when he entered the house, but from when he parked the car to then leaving, or whoever left in that car. And I'm just going to give you guys my theory, and I think I have mentioned it on here before, but I don't believe he went into that house expecting to kill 4 people. I truly do not. I think had he thought he was going to commit a quadruple murder, I think that it probably would have been, first of all, he would have planned to have longer time in there, but I think that he probably would have killed everybody in that house. I don't think it would have just been 4 people. My opinion, take it for what it's worth. We'll see if once the trial happens, if I'm right. I believe he went in there with a single target, and I believe that target was Maddie. I think that that's why he went directly upstairs and didn't even bother with anything on the ground level or the floor below, but he went directly upstairs to Maddie's room. I don't think he expected Kaylee to either be there in the house or to be sleeping in Maddie's room, but we know they were sharing.
And as we know of other killers, and I'm not even going to call him a serial killer because I think this was a mass killing. As we know of other killers, they've abducted their victims and taken them away. So the fact that, people say, well, there was hardly any evidence. Well, there's a reason for that. Think about it. If he abducts her and he takes her off and kills her somewhere else, it's even harder for you to track who it was. You get what I'm saying? Like if Kaylee wouldn't have been in her room, he could have abducted her, took her down the stairs, out the slider, put her in the car, drove off with her, down the route that he planned, heading south on 95, done what he was going to do. Hell, he even may have had a burial site already ready. We know that other killers have done this. They have burial sites already ready. They have disposable sites. They have burn sites. They have all this stuff. To say that just because he didn't know these people did not mean that he would have been incapable of doing this, you're being closed-minded. You're not opening your mind to other aspects. See, I'm open to what Annie's saying on the defensive side. I really am. But my mind is also telling me that if this individual was just planning on one, an abduction sounds more like it than to kill them in the house, because there's more chance of being heard or seen, which probably was what happened.
A bed. So it's my opinion that when he went to attack Maddie, he had no other choice but to kill Kaylee as well, because she was sitting next to her, or laying next to her rather. And then when he goes to leave, he's coming down the stairs, and before he can exit out that sliding door, the same one he allegedly entered from, Xana is awake. We know she was on TikTok. It's believed she had ordered DoorDash. I don't remember if it was confirmed if it was Jack in the Box or not. I can't remember. And whether she was maybe throwing her food away and leaving the kitchen or in the hallway or whatever was going on, he saw that she was awake. And we also know that there was that.
The one question I do have about the DoorDash, and if anybody knows this, to be specific, that you found in the documents or that you've heard law enforcement talk about, is I read somewhere where the DoorDash was ordered at 3:59. Well, how, if the DoorDash was ordered at 3:59, unless the DoorDasher was waiting at Jack in the Box and Pullman was 10 minutes away, how did that DoorDash arrive a little after 4? That's like a minute and a half, if that, to get that DoorDash. That is fast. That's something that doesn't make sense to me. A lot of this does, but that doesn't. Oh, that's when it was received at 3:59. Okay, I could have read it wrong. That makes a lot more sense. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I was thinking if it was ordered at 3:59, how the hell did they get it there so fast? I never get DoorDash that fast. Thank you for that, PKC. That makes a lot more sense. And I was wrong. Okay, thank you for that. Let's continue on.
Recollection of him saying, "Don't worry, I'm going to help you," or "Come here, I'm going to help you." So I think that's when he approached her, probably in the doorway of the bedroom, is again just my thought, and had to attack her to keep her quiet. Saw Ethan was in the room as well, so then had to attack and kill him to keep him quiet. And it was almost one of those things where, again, just my opinion, guys, fight or flight took over, and instead of flight, he went into fight mode and just started killing. But then his body, again, just my belief, was so physically exhausted that by the time he's exiting Ethan's bedroom and Dylan's in the hallway and sees him, he just walks right past her with that blank frozen stare, and while she's in that frozen state, and just leaves out the sliding door. And a lot of people have pushed back on that theory of mine, saying, I think in total that would have meant he had to commit these murders in, gosh, what is it, 11 minutes, maybe 13 minutes, something small. And they're like, how would you kill 4 people with a K-bar knife that has a blade like that? First of all, any knife, it does not take long to stab someone, certainly not to kill them. It takes a few sharp, quick, good hits. And I don't mean that to be grotesque or overly graphic. I just am trying to level set with you guys. I've covered a lot of cases, a ton of cases, and unfortunately, a lot of them have had to do with stabbings, and it does not take somebody long to stab somebody. And yes, it would have meant that he.
That's a good point, Annie. But here's a thought from the chat. I don't know if she ever got that DoorDash. I've always wondered if the killer ordered it as a no-knock in Xana's name to have another car in the area and at the house at the time of the murders. That's a good thought, because I ran into a news article that stated, and I put this on my community post, where it stated that a gift card was used for that Jack in the Box order, and that gift card was bought in Pullman. So that that could that could be something that plays into that as well. Hey, Truth, thank you for being here. Let's see what you got to say. That's why the medical examiner's testimony matters so much. The self-authentication show that they pulled Xana and Ethan DoorDash records. Wonder if they pulled both to show that neither one of them ordered it. Good point. Don't know if they recently ate or not. Very true. Very true. Good points, guys. Good points.
He probably would have had to remove his clothes as soon as he got out of that sliding glass door or right when he got there. We don't know if he was wearing, some sort of hazmat suit, if he then bundled it, put it in his car, if his car was wrapped in plastic. And this is all why, too, I plan on having not only a defense attorney, but a prosecutor on here very soon. So make sure you're subscribed to either the podcast or the YouTube channel so that you don't miss that. And you'll know who these people are when I bring them on, because I want to argue both sides of it. How did he leave without blood in his car or in the drain when they did the search warrant if they never found any? How did all this happen? How could somebody have physically committed a quadruple murder in this amount of time? I also want to hear how the defense will say, well, no, this is why it couldn't have happened. So stay tuned. That's going to be a follow-up episode. But my point is, that's what I believe happened. And I kind of came to that conclusion when I did that map time a couple of years ago, when we put the whole timeline on, which again, if you're watching the video version of this, you see it on the screen. But when we put all that together, because I was like, it is definitely possible. When you look at the timestamps of when Xana had phone activity going, when you look at the time of when the neighbor's ring camera or whatever the surveillance device was picked up the loud thud noise, it does start to make sense. So I could be wrong. Maybe he did go in there just saying, whoever it was, Brian or otherwise, we're going to commit this huge murder. Maybe there are two people who were involved, since there was an earlier person of interest that they were looking into. Maybe I'll completely be proven wrong, but that is just what I believe. Now, anyways, going back to my point of saying, is he physically capable of doing this? That's what the prosecution believed happened, that he went in there, he was able to do this, and he fled within mere minutes. But the defense's response is that with his coordination disorder, that level of speed and precision is just not possible. But the state fired back, saying even Brian's own experts admits that this condition of his affects only his fine motor skills, things like handwriting or tying his shoes, not his ability to move, run, or use gross motor skills. And stabbing, it is a gross motor skill. So the state says that the diagnosis, it does not change a thing.
That's so true. In the document that was stated, it was stated that it was prior. It was prior. So, what do y'all think as far as the state or the defense's theory on he was not physically capable to commit these murders? I hear that from a lot of different areas, and I'd like to hear what y'all have to say on that aspect. I'm open to what y'all think. Um, do you feel that he was capable physically of committing these murders based on what the defense is claiming, that he wasn't coordinated enough, that he didn't have the motor skill to commit these? What do y'all think? Let me know in the chat what y'all think. Y'all think that he possessed the motor skill to be capable of committing these crimes? Because the defense doesn't. The defense is arguing that there's no way that he was capable. What do y'all think? I believe that he is capable or was capable. I believe that he had the stamina. I believe that he had the strength. I believe that he possibly had the physical awareness to be able to overtake these smaller females. And if the larger male was taken off guard or ambushed, then by any means, anybody can be overtaken when you're not expecting somebody to show up with a K-bar. What do y'all think? Y'all think he's capable of having the physical prowess to do this? So let me see what she had to say, and then I'll.
So now we're left with a defense trying to reframe the suspect's behavior and a prosecution that is not budging, arguing that none of this proves that he couldn't have done it. The defense is saying that the state is twisting the evidence. The state is saying that the defense is stretching. And the jury, they're going to have to make sense of all of it. But the bottom line in this case is turning into a war of just timelines, data, expert testimony, the works. The defense wants those timing advance records admitted, and fast. We're only 5 months out from trial. And if those 7 minutes matter as much as the defense says that they do, this could shift everything. There's a critical hearing coming up on April 9th, and if these timing records are as vital as the defense claims, like I said, it could change everything. So I certainly will keep you updated. I'm going to be back on here with the follow-up with the 2 attorneys as well, kind of giving us almost like, let's battle it out here as though we are in the courtroom, get both of their perspectives. And then I also will keep you updated on the hearing, any new information, because even though we're only 5 months out, the information is starting to leak and get released, and we are learning more and more every single week, it seems like. I also have a full playlist on my YouTube channel if you want to go back through these map times that we did, the timelines, the visual aids. We did like some 3D renderings of the house and what his movements could have been as well. So you can go and take a look at those in the playlist. Other than that, though, I will keep you updated. So make sure that you either are following on the podcast serialously or subscribed to the YouTube channel 10 to Life so that you do not miss these updates. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. I will be back with you with another case or another update on this case very soon. But until then, stay safe.
Thank you for that. You did a wonderful job, I believe. You know, I agree with what you are saying right there. I really do, because, you know, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and I'm sure we'll all find out when the trial gets here if any of our theories or any of our hypotheses are close, or if we're so far away that there's no possibility any of that could have happened. And it's interesting to get to that point, because I'm very ready to get to that point, because, you know, there's so much coming out and so many people having differences of opinion, but also formulating sides that it's just terrible. It's terrible to be so hateful when it's something that, as people say, what do they say? An innocent man is going to be put to death. An innocent man is going to be put to death. I want to show y'all this. Hold on a second. I posted this on the short, but I don't know if anybody watched it. Okay, here we go. Hold on a second. I hate when this does this. It's annoying, to say the least. So isn't that quite interesting? It's quite interesting, I thought. I hope that y'all enjoyed this. So I've enjoyed presenting it. Like I said, I didn't have much going on today, so I thought I'd get on here and I'd give y'all a little Idaho. Y'all have a wonderful Saturday. If it's storming where you're at, be safe out there. Maestro, cue that music.